Exceptional Randos show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.
Well, that was random. Exceptional Radio.
Good afternoon. It is a fantastic October 17th. It's nice and crisp and cool and the sun's out. It's just gorgeous outside. I've got a quick gripe and then we can get on to some fun stuff. I keep reading about people, leaving their jobs because of vaccination mandates, and mostly it's like healthcare workers, but some of them are like civil servants, and it just occurred to me, it's like, these are going to become part of like the licensing requirements and certification requirements for these kinds of jobs moving forward. And it just kind of blows my mind that, here's a very self-righteous group of people who think that like somehow they're not gonna, these licensing requirements aren't going to apply. Like every other occupation, every industry that requires certification or licensing requires compliance with those requirements. Like that's the bare minimum. You have to be compliant with this to do those jobs. And so this idea that, a handful of people are just, upset that they happen to have a job in an industry that requires compliance with licensing and certification, think that, they're just going to throw a fit and get away with, not doing the bare minimum to keep their job. Yeah, seriously. I mean, these are people that probably don't belong in those industries anyways. I'm not even talking about like aptitude. Sure, obviously they have the aptitude to perform the job, but somehow there's so many absurd, they don't trust the science. Like, what the fuck? Why are they even in healthcare? Or they're worried about the side effects. Well, we've had a year of the broadest survey of study of clinical trials in history. Like a global study was a global trials happened for a year. We know what's going to happen to people.
Right. These are people who don't understand what actually constitutes research. And when they're like, I did my own research. No, you Googled a few things and you reinforced your biases. And that's like bias confirmation is what people are doing when they're actually saying they're doing research. It's like I saw a TikTok video where somebody's like, unless you had peers reviewing your work, coming in and giving you feedback on your analysis, you're not doing research.
Yeah, you have to perform bias analysis.
And it's like if you're actually doing research, there are certain steps that are involved in terms of like, if you're doing like a literature review or a bibliometric analysis, there's still an element of you're going to have to report your sources and cite everything. And what are your references, like having, and then on top of that, you can't use non-academic sources. So like a YouTube video is not a source.
Well, even if you pull like 5 words in a string of characters out of some text, that has to be cited too. Like all of these things have to be provided in like references. There's basically, it's interesting for every like research paper that I've read in the past year, all related to the explosion of epidemiology information. There's a huge list that leads to 20, 30, 60, 100 research papers. And sometimes they're only pulling like a data table from that research. But that data table, once you go find it, it's this giant Excel sheet that's, damn near 200 megabytes. And it's like, what the hell? How is any normal person supposed to make sense of any of that if they don't have access to the actual like database itself and see how it's structured?
Yeah. So here's something I can speak on specifically because part of my doctorate that I'm working on is like working on large databases and or data sets to parse data and take data lakes and turn them into usable data sets. So this is where like someone who doesn't know how to use like R or pivot tables in Excel, yeah, they won't be able to do anything with that information. That information is basically noise to those people, and they want to act like they can look at a third hand reference to that information as if it wasn't tertiary and not even the secondary resource. This is a tertiary resource.
Man, okay, so you mentioned R and pivot tables as within functions of Excel. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that the vast majority of computer users, and I mean people who've taken Excel classes, don't know how to preserve leading zeros when they import data.
No.
I guarantee it.
No.
I can guarantee it almost. You know, every person who like thinks that they're like some kind of Excel master, I guarantee that they don't even think about leading zeros. They just don't.
No.
So I don't have very much faith in the general public just being able to pull up, you know, an exported database and being able to make sense of it. I have zero. It's just.
Yeah, and I put a ton of hours into like practice data analysis, and it was breaking me mentally, emotionally, physically, just doing practice work where I'm like, there's no way people are actually doing data analysis in this form and they probably don't even know what the data analysis takes. Like regression analysis,
going through all of the logs, looking for that one string of characters that's fucked up, so you can fix the fucking code just so it'll spit out
doing the code and the analysis.
Yeah,
so
all at
this
the
is
same
what
time.
Also, yeah, this is why it's so crazy is because you're doing the code, but you're also doing the analysis. So if you don't know how to code, that you can't do the analysis at all. But if you know how to code, you still have to know how to do the fucking analysis. So there's two different things happening when you have to look at data sets and break it down. So this is where I'm like, even in Excel, when it's not code intensive, pivot tables are not easy to create. And if you don't know what variables you're looking at, you don't know what the fuck the pivot table, like how to even make a pivot table or a pivot chart. And that's where I'm like, the things that I have done in practice with data sets just for classes, I'm like, there's no way people even understand what margin of error means, let alone understand how to do the research on these data sets. That said, it's like you don't necessarily need to know how to do things to look at. I mean, you need to be able to grasp them to look at the results. You don't necessarily have to understand how to do them to be able to understand the results. But if you don't understand either, then you're basically a blind, like a person who has no grasp of anything, trying to form an opinion with no understanding. And this is where the people who then turn around and they're like, oh, I saw this thing on Facebook or on Reddit. I did my own research. They don't even know how to do research. They think research is just like listening to things and thinking about things. They don't understand that there is actually a process around research, because this country is anti-intellectual and constantly undermines the notion that thought has energy associated with it, that thought is effort, that thought is work. And further, it makes it seem that anyone who is a specialist in their field is only a specialist because they got a degree and somebody just gave them this degree. They didn't have to work for that. It's the degree that makes them a specialist, not their actual subject matter expertise. And this is where I'm like, I'm a subject matter expert in multiple things, which is not very common because it takes a long time. And have taken like the last 20 years of my life have just basically been dedicated to becoming an expert in things, and it's not always the same thing. So that's why when people are like, oh, what is it? Jack of all trades, master of none. I'm like, no, become a master of a few. You fucking idiot.
We have time now.
We have time. Exactly. We have time.
15 is not middle aged anymore.
Exactly.
Well, that's the thing. So I just read this article about superimmunity and how some people who had caught COVID in the early stages and survived, and they go and get a vaccination, all of a sudden they've got this incredible immune response that's like beyond anything from the trials, because they didn't have people who had recovered from it to get vaccinated for the trials. So anyways, this isn't like a quick read, and it's got a lot of terminology that requires looking things up. That's not a problem at all. It has 10 references, and each one of these is, an article, like, several paragraph disambiguation, like a summary that just kind of highlights what to expect in the article. And then, this first one about immunity, it's pages, and it's got, oh man, wow. I'm still scrolling. Okay, there. It has 63 references. I mean, just to follow this down the rabbit hole, we're already up to like 70 references to check. Yeah.
Yeah, my dissertation has like 75 or 80 or something. I don't know.
You're not done.
Lost count. Yeah, I'm not even done.
Yeah, I think that's pretty standard. I think that's why it's so amusing to see even complaints about things like critical race theory, which, as I understand it, isn't really something that's taught until people get into graduate programs. Like it's not really it's not really the focus of undergraduate studies. It's not the kind of thing that you would encounter in high school.
Not at all.
It's a really complex interdisciplinary course of studies.
On that note, I'm not sure we should, like, I get that there's Dr. Martin Luther King Day. I don't think kids should be like learning about Dr. Martin Luther King arbitrarily because they don't understand it. Like, when you have 4 and 5-year-olds, like, I have a dream, they don't fucking understand what that means at all. So then when they're being taught this stuff,
well, it's indoctrination.
Of course it's indoctrination, but what I'm saying is, like, as a Black person who grew up seeing, like, I saw 2 different education systems. I saw the white education system teaching Black history, and then I would be in like Black, church summer school, or like some they have like summer camp, and then they teach you like Black history from the Black perspective. So the things that I was being taught about Dr. Martin Luther King at that age are incongruous with reality. And as you're saying, it's indoctrination. And that's why I'm like, I don't think kids should be learning about Dr. Martin Luther King at 5 years old. Like, it's a hollow lesson, and it serves to create this false sense of progress. And it starts the compartmentalization of Black excellence being in the past. And there's a lot of problems, I think, with teaching children about Dr. Martin Luther King the way they do. It's fucking, it like seriously makes me take pause, where I'm like, this kid needs to be learning about like colors and shit. Like, not Dr. Martin Luther King. They're not old enough to understand the significance of Martin Luther King. There's not even like, let alone Martin Luther. And this is one of the big problems. Americans will be like, Dr. MLK Jr. I mean, the ones that do that don't even call him doctor. They just say MLK. They don't understand the significance of Martin Luther. They don't understand Martin Luther. Yeah. And this is one of the big problems, where I'm like, when you have abstracted what Martin Luther was trying to say into this martyr that was murdered by the government to then use his image to manipulate people's thought. The very notion of removing what Martin Luther originally stood for, and then in the process destroying Dr. MLK's legacy and undermining it while his fucking daughter's alive. His daughter's on Twitter, man. Bernice.
Yeah.
His son is out there too on Twitter. They act like these motherfuckers don't exist because they don't want you to hear what his daughter has to say about the way they're abusing his legacy. They want to just manipulate you into thinking, oh, this MLK, he spoke up for black people, and then we figured it out, and now everything's solved. As if his daughter's not on Twitter saying, don't listen to people who invoke his fucking, like, anybody who invokes the fucking I have a dream speech to then be like, this is why these black people are victims. Don't listen to those people. She's constantly saying that shit on Twitter. And I'm amazed at how few followers she has for a country that has a fucking entire day devoted to her goddamn father. Seriously, it's fucking bullshit. It's bullshit. It's because people don't know she even exists. It's because people are made to not know she fucking even exists. And that's or his son. Oh, I mean, he's got multiple children, but it's like I remember going and seeing like his son speak when I was like 12 or 13, and people were like asking him how to like solve race. I mean, not like racism, but like solve problems as if he was the second coming because his father was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And because he then is not empowered by the media, he can't really do anything. So people are like putting him in this spot where it's like, you know, when you go see him talk, it's like usually in a small crowd because it's not fucking publicized huge. So there's like this element of like he can't be as powerful because the media doesn't even act like he exists.
So kind of off topic, but similar, like the children of John Lennon, Julian and Sean, both had their own semi-independent, if you can call that independent, because it's clearly they had a lot of attention because of who their father was. But they were always standing in his shadow. And I remember that there was always this expectation that they would, you know, be the next, they would provide the next wave of enlightened rock and roll or something, especially because Julian has his dad's voice and Sean Lennon is kind of crazy creative. But I think that it's hard for children, especially of powerful figures, to escape that.
That's also partially because John Lennon was never enlightened.
Yeah.
John Lennon was a fucking hack. John Lennon was a talentless piece of shit fucking pseudo philosopher that tricked a bunch of people because they were on drugs. John Lennon is a fucking piece of shit. I cannot stand John Lennon. He made a song called Women Are the Niggers of the World, and people never talk about that shit. Fuck John Lennon. Fuck his racist ass. Fuck him for like, I mean, the Beatles are trash. I'm not like a Beatles fan anyway, but for all of like the bullshit that John Lennon caused because he was so talentless and everybody was like all up his fucking ass. Fuck that dude. And that's where I'm like, this is part of the media then being able to like create these false gods. John Lennon was a false god. Like the way Dr. MLK Jr. is being manipulated, he's a false god. It's like it is the same thing. It is,
yeah.
And it's very dangerous. And this is where I'm like, I'm coming out strong against John Lennon because I've been very much thinking about this. Like I watched their fucking bed-ins at the goddamn hotel where him and Yoko were like laying in bed for peace, man. We're just sleeping we're not sleeping. We're just laying in bed for peace. Come on, get in bed with us. We might have an orgy. I don't know, but this is for peace, man. Fuck those idiots. That was dumb. That was some dumb shit. And this is where we are so far removed from it. And I think it's like, there are people who come out strong. John Lennon was such a visionary. No, he wasn't. He's a fucking clown. He fucking abused people's drug abuse and made them think he was doing something profound when in reality, he's just a fucking drugged up clown. fuck John Lennon. He's a goddamn pseudo philosopher, a goddamn pseudo god, and it's the fucking media's fault for creating these false prophets and false gods. And that's what I'm like, it sound like, I'm glad you brought him up, and it's not like this is not out of nowhere. I've really been like going into a deep dive on John and Yoko because I'm like, man, Yoko was fucking horrible. She's a horrible artist. She's still horrible. Well, absolutely terrible.
You know, the thing about Yoko that always
fucking kids didn't do anything well. Like, she's fucking terrible.
She made a recording, an album of her just like basically howling into a microphone. Ugh. And I gave it the novelty. Let's listen to portions of this because this might be interesting, and it really wasn't. It was just kind of painful, and I felt bad for subjecting my speakers to that. But there's something to be said for the kind of stability that somebody has to experience in life to be able to create something so profoundly weird.
And then act like they're on Fringe. Yeah, and
then people buy it. Like they ate it up.
Yeah, that's what's so disgusting about it. They're trying to be like, oh, I'm absolving myself of riches. You have to be rich to do that. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. You're not Siddhartha. You're not a prodigal son. You're just some rich guy who's fucking high. And you want to feel profound before you die. That's all it was. Well, that's all it was.
I mean, LSD in the 60s. What do we have now? Ayahuasca. And I'm sure that people are still licking toads, hoping to find, the enlightenment.
That's because enlightenment became a level to unlock for society's progression. And then you're like, oh, if you can do it like John Lennon, you can become this deity and people will revere you forever. And that's how you live on. Fucking David Bowie did it. He was able to become enlightened. Man, the way people like deify celebrity and shit, it's like, it's real dangerous. It's real dangerous. Oh, yeah. And that's kind of where I'm like, you see, I wonder how much of our perspective on history is like tainted by the same shit, in the sense of like how much of Jesus's following is like people just fanboying over time. Like Christians are just fucking Jesus stans, like in the way where you're like, you got the insane stands and you got the like part-time stands.
I think there's some reasonable stands who really just like...
Yeah, there's some reasonable stands. But they're all just Jesus stands over time is what it comes down to. You know what I mean? Like, there's Muhammad stands and, like, Moses stands. Like, that's what they are.
Moses stand sounds like the name of a country. Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah. No, but all these stands.
I wonder if there'd have been fewer problems if they'd have called it Moses Stan.
Like, but between the Rogan stands and the Elon stands, those are
Rogan stand. Rogan stand is located in this patch of land.
He's always talking about
on the corner border of Oregon, Washington, and Idaho. It's where those three states butt up. That's where Rogan stand is.
Well, I don't know. I used to listen to him. I haven't listened to him in years, but he would always be talking about starting a commune anyway. So Rogan stand is definitely something that could potentially become a thing at some point. He was always, and it's funny, like in retrospect, I'm so glad I don't listen to that shit anymore, because he was like talking about starting communes way too much not to be a cult. Like the Rogan cult is definitely real, because then like somebody out there in the future is going to hear this and then slice this up with Joe Rogan talking about communes at all these different points in his career. And it's like, yeah, no, the commune, everybody should have seen the Rogan cult coming as frequently as he joked, air quote, about starting communes. And that's where I'm like, man, It was always in front of us.
Have you seen his new podcast suite? His new
Nope.
Oh, dude, it's like,
Oh, you talking about the one in Texas where it's like it looks like he's inside of a fucking
he's in like
microchip.
It's like it's like the inside of a section of an airplane. That's what it reminds me of. It's like they took like 12 rows of seats and cut that section of the airplane out, like a cylinder of it. Then they buried it underground and lined it with like red LEDs, and it sounds like you're inside of a can. And so before, I really liked the production value of his show, and it was like, you know, some dudes in a garage that had been turned into a, you know, podcast studio. That was really cool and had a good vibe. It was like a room you'd want to hang out in. But this new thing, I just can't get over its, well, clearly they made it for the visual appeal, but in doing so, I already have enough issues having to suffer through listening to some asshole on a plane talk incessantly to the person next to him who's just trying to take a nap. Like, I don't want to listen to 2 hours of 4 people talking about something in an airplane.
Yeah, this one, I think I've seen it, but this looks like if it starts flashing, it's gonna start like a mind controlled fucking. You can't be in there for too long or you'll roast.
It makes perfect sense if it's like the boss level for like a Contra X or something. It's where you have to kill some alien horde, maybe a Resident Evil boss level, like Doom from way back in the day. You know, it makes sense in that kind of like aesthetic. It just looks like a dungeon.
Oh wait, it says they got rid of the futuristic red spaceship.
Oh, thank goodness. I mean, I'm not rooting for them to fail. I think it's fine what they do. I don't really care. I don't pay attention to him.
He's a fucking transphobe. Fuck that dude.
Okay. Well,
I hope he
fuck
fails.
that dude. It's just so surreal that they, you know, when drastic changes are made to the production of anything, and they just keep doing it. At least they change. At least they realize that they're doing something wrong.
I don't hope people fail until they start using their influence to punch at specific, like, marginalized groups. Like him and Chappelle, like, I didn't care about, like, I used to be a fan of Dave Chappelle.
Wait, so what exactly happened with Dave Chappelle? I've seen, you know, glances of Netflix firing somebody because somebody leaked something apparently, but there's some kind of he obviously said some shit.
Yeah. So the joke, I'm not watching any of his stuff anymore.
Yeah, I haven't watched anything he's made.
I went to see him live at one point, and that's why I'm like, it's sad to see people get old, and I think that's just what happens with these people. Is like, you know, it'll happen with us eventually, but
yeah.
He just got old in front of our eyes. So like, the backstory is like, he's been antagonizing the trans community specifically because I'm not sure what is like his root cause of it, but he has been like,
is he one of those guys that talks about gay agendas?
Not really. This is why it's weird. So this is why it's like, he's not really homophobic in his language, but he's had some homophobic jokes, and then the jokes go into more transphobic, where it would be like using like the old tranny joke type thing, where it's like, you know, his stuff would drift into that, and then transgender people were like taking issue with him, and he wouldn't stop, and he just kept pushing and pushing. So then on this recent one, he's like using his this is fucked up too. So he's using his friendship with a transgender person who killed herself, who gave him a pass to make trans jokes as a way to make his exit joke, saying he's like done with the issue. So he was like trying to, I don't know exactly the context, but he's basically trying to use this joke to say he's no longer going to make jokes at the trans community, and apparently it didn't land. So then that's what people got upset about. So there was someone who
wait, that's just like saying I have a black friend.
Right, exactly. But here's where it gets worse. Someone who works at Netflix tweeted about it, and the tweet wasn't even like vulgar. It was basically saying like, when you make, I'm not gonna paraphrase to try to misrepresent, but the crux of the comment was like, we're not a joke, or we're not like offended at your jokes, like effectively, because when you make jokes about us, it like the subtext is like trans people die when these things are not taken seriously. It's not just being offended. So this person gets suspended, and then like Netflix backed Dave Chappelle while suspending the trans employee for making that tweet. Then people planned a walkout at Netflix over them siding with Dave, and then I think they fired a person who was like organizing the walkout, who was a trans person as well. So this is where it wasn't just the joke. It's that now, because he made the jokes, and then he's like, oh, if this is what being canceled, like, I love it. Proving, in fact, that there is no such thing as cancel culture. So then it's this whole thing where like he's mocking trans people. In the process, trans people are like losing their jobs by trying to say, hey, why is my employer promoting hatred towards like this my marginalized group?
Yeah.
And this is like the people who are siding with Dave Chappelle. Now it's like fucking Fox News. If Dave Chappelle wanted to be the front runner for Fox News, I feel like his younger self would be disappointed in his older self. He can say whatever, fuck you, that's my money. And that's what happens when you sell your fucking soul for goddamn hating on a marginalized group, apparently.
Yeah.
Like, fuck that dude. It's gross, man. I would honestly like to have a conversation with that dude about like what went wrong. Like, where did he go wrong? You know what I mean? And that's where, because I remember when we went and saw him, it's like at a certain point when somebody becomes so famous, quote unquote, then you're basically just paying them to tell you how much you annoy them. And that's what I was like, this is, I mean, at the time it was funny, but now I'm like, fuck you. You know, I wish I could get my money back. You know, fuck you. I wish I could time travel and like tell myself not to go to that fucking show.
Yeah.
Fuck you. You know, it's like, fuck, you shat on all of your own fucking history by being a douchebag now. I'll never watch Half Baked again. You know what I mean? Like, I'll never enjoy any of his old shit ever again because he grew into some old douchebag that fucking hates on trans people. This old transphobic man. And it's the same shit. I can't listen to rap music that drops F-bombs that aren't fuck. I can't do that shit anymore. It like makes me cringe. Like if I happen to accidentally do it, it's like, oh, that was definitely not intentional. But it's like, if I know there's an F-bomb in the song, I'm like not listening to it because I'm like an adult now. And when that shit was happening when I was a child, I was like, okay, whatever. It's not a big deal. But now I realize it is a big deal.
Fuck isn't the F word that hurts people.
Right, exactly.
Fuck is just expletive.
I haven't said that word in 30 years. I mean, or I guess like maybe, I guess it would probably, whenever you're a teenager, you know what I mean? And that's where, in that sense, it's like, the only reason people were even saying it then is because it was socially acceptable. Anybody who says they didn't say it is a fucking liar.
Well, everyone said that
the R word.
Well, they would drop the F-bomb and say it's a bundle of sticks because we all took the I-step exam.
Right. Yeah. Anybody who says they didn't say it is a fucking liar. Mm-hmm. But the issue is, did you stop saying it? because it was very common. It was not even like socially like taboo to say it. It was like if you didn't say it, you were like looked at weird. They would be like, "Are you that person?" You know what I'm saying? If you didn't, that's what it's like.
It's
if
the
people
Zap
are gonna act
Brannigan.
like that's not the way it was, they're fucking liars.
Well, it's the Zap Brannigan character when they get apprehended by the Amazons and they're gonna have to be snoo-snooed to death, and both Brannigan and Fry are like, yeah, snoo-snoo, and then Kip is just kind of cringing, and Brannigan looks at him, he's like, what's wrong with you? Are you gay? It's like, that's who that person is.
That's how it was, bro.
Yeah.
And people who are acting like they were quote unquote enlightened back then are fucking liars. And that's kind of where,
well, there may have been a few really lucky people who lived in an environment where that word was never used.
Oh, for sure. I mean,
Maybe.
and I mean, I know like
outliers.
There are outliers, of course. And I'm saying like everybody knows the outliers. The outliers don't have to prove themselves because everybody knows who they are, which is why I'm saying the people who have to say it are the fucking liars.
Yeah.
If you know, I know, I guarantee you can recall in your head the people in your high school who were like anti that shit back then. It's like they were outspoken about it, and you know exactly who those people are. I know who the you know what I'm saying. So that's why I'm like, they don't have to say it, and in fact they probably don't say it. So this is where
one of those people from my high school, she still is in Bloomington. She has a podcast where she talks about local and community of concerns, issues. She's still very vocal. She's still, she's very involved with, I think, the People's Market Co-op, Farmers Market. Her name is Jada B. She's quite awesome, actually. She's also involved with Bloomington's Black Lives Matter. Has always been highly outspoken. I've always had actually quite a bit of respect for her because she's, can speak well. It's one of those things that today I saw a thread where somebody was talking about getting carjacked and robbed, and in their description they said, and I had my truck and everything stolen. And I keep thinking, it's like, why do people say they had something done to them when something happens to them? And it's one of these reoccurring things that reminds me that the English language is in fact a very nuanced language and form of communication, and most people do not speak like they write, most people can't write nearly as well as they think they can. And so when I encounter this, I had this happen. It's like, wait, why would somebody? Clearly, I'm not interpreting this communication properly because they didn't ask for this to happen. I think that's the reason that there's so much distrust of research, is that it's hard to read. Some of it's extremely difficult to read because it's scientific data.
That's what secondary research is for. And this is where, I'm helping other people do research, and one of the things about primary research is it has no onus of making itself more accessible to lay people. That is not a responsibility of primary research whatsoever. It should never do that. And I think that's a misconception that lay people have, because they don't want to learn new things that would make them more knowledgeable to be able to access that primary research. So they want primary research to come down to their level, and that should never happen. I hope that never happens, personally, because if that happens, then that means research is dead, effectively.
Well, who needs to research when you can just go to YouTube and some chiropractor will tell you how the vaccine is causing problems. That actually happened, though. Some chiropractor went on YouTube and was talking about all the bad side effects and shit. It's like, this guy's not even involved in the actual study.
Right. He's a
chiropractor.
He's not a fucking biologist not a microbiologist.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and this is where when people are like, he's a scientist, they don't know the difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist, let alone the difference between a chiropractor and a fucking general practitioner.
A
And
psychologist and a psychiatrist have two vastly different degree paths.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep, a lot of Americans would probably hear that and be like, "What do you mean? It's the same thing. Just lay on their couch. Give me some pills."
Oh,
Fucking shrink is a racist ass term too.
yeah.
Fucking, there's so much racist shit in our like just common lexicon, and the way that then they'll have something that was racist and then modify it so it's not racist anymore as overtly, but it's still got the connections to its roots and shit. Where you're like, huh, like Snicker used to be Snigger, and I mean it's right there. So that whole thing, the whole reason I even brought that up is because apparently whenever they did the translation for fucking Squid Game, they used Snigger instead of Snicker. Nobody in the goddamn fucking English speaking world since 1865 has used goddamn fucking Snigger without the fear that they will get smacked the fucking taste out their mouth in the Western world. I swear to Christ, nobody better say, "Oh, he was sniggering around me," and not like have some fear. Like I'm not a person to lash out when somebody says like that word around me, but they better be scared I will. Cause that's where I'm like, don't look at me and think you can say some shit like that around me and not get your back broken or some shit. Cause like the last time some dude said some shit around like that around me, I tossed him into a pile of horse shit. I didn't hurt him. I didn't hurt him. I literally tossed him into a pile of horse shit just to prove, like, hey, don't say shit like that around people. And that's where I'm like, people get fucking comfortable just because they think like, oh, we got to be like, oh, if I say that word and you lash out at me, I'll call the cops. So fucking what? So what? What? Until they get here, I'm beating your ass.
I just had this image of you like grabbing somebody and then swinging the earth around with your feet and like smacking him with the earth in a pile of poo.
No, the thing is, he swung at me first.
Oh.
That's the craziest shit about it. Is like after all that, it was like I knew it was about to happen. So that's where I was like, I was ready for it based on the words he was using. So that's why I'm like, I'm just gonna let him do his own thing. And then, like I said, I just put him into a pile of horse shit just to show him, like, hey, you didn't even know this horse shit was there. You ended up in it.
There's one thing that I can say that I've actually enjoyed about pandemic life is that I have had almost zero desire to go to places with large crowds, and as such, I have seen no fights for the past year and a half. Like none. I haven't seen one fight in public. I've seen, I saw a car accident, a week ago, but I haven't seen like people just getting into it. And the last, almost 30 years living in Bloomington, during the summer, it's almost impossible to drive through downtown without seeing something about to happen. Well, at night when the students are out partying. But still, it's like, it's been pretty calm. And the only people that I've spent any time around with are my close friends who, we sit around and have long conversations. I wonder how many other people have experienced that kind of lifestyle transition where, it's not like I'm itching to go out and I can't wait to go hang out with a large group of strangers at a bar. Like, I wonder how many people have like gotten over that socializing addiction.
I wonder, man. And then a lot of that socializing addiction comes from the media indoctrination of needing to show things off.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like, it's been hard for the media to indoctrinate people into showing things off. So I wonder if those two things fall off in tandem.
Because I know that in the last year, the number of like YouTube channels that are really highly focused on one thing, the ones that I followed have all gotten remarkably better, like marked improvement across the board, like production, cinematography, just everything. Every little thing has improved with a lot of the stuff that I'm interested in. And so I know that there's a group, a portion of the population that has taken this time to really dive even further into their thing.
Yeah.
But then, we still have, I guess numbers are going down right now, but, we have periods where COVID numbers start going on the rise and people start dying and kids start dying, and then it starts to wane a little bit more. It goes back down to whatever normal is going to be, whatever they decide normal is.
Yeah, it's so weird, man. I'm like of the mind that because we're in it, it's really hard for people to deal with. I mean, it's hard for everybody to deal with the trauma, but especially people who are not good at mental health acknowledgement in the first place, so, which is like most of America. So this is where I'm like, there's times where I'll be like, there's just flashes of like nihilism because we're in the middle of a pandemic and you might die at any moment. You know what I mean? And I think that's where that reality is kind of, is not an apocalypse, but in the sense of having to constantly deal with that. It is fatiguing, but at the same time, it's still there. And I think it's really difficult for people to grasp with that flux, and then they like either just compartmentalize it completely or are able to healthily cope with that by using their time to constantly build new things better. And I think that's partially what you're seeing is like the people who redirect that have just taken it and been like, I'm just going to make everything possibly better as possible. Anything that can get better, I'm going to do that. And that's where that type of mental approach, I think, is something that either you learned it during the pandemic or you didn't. And this is where it's like when that whole thing at the beginning was like, oh, people bought up all the fucking flour and the
toilet paper.
No, not the toilet paper.
Oh, that's right.
The fucking
for
yeast.
Bread.
Yeah, because everybody's like all of a sudden they want to become a baker. Well, maybe like 5% actually did, but I bet the 5% that did started doing other shit too. And those are the people who we see still improving their fucking product. Yeah. And that's what my hypothesis is based on my experience in like redirecting that. I'll just call it flash nihilism. It's like it comes in flashes because we're in the middle of a pandemic, and it's like you want to internalize the nihilism, but the easiest way to vent, it's like I use that thought as a vent to the nihilism because I'm like, all right, people are fucking constantly dying around us because we're in the middle of a pandemic. It's okay to be nihilistic for a second. It's okay.
It's like mass mania. Everyone's manic. Everyone went manic.
Everyone is manic because they're not letting out that valve and they're internalizing that constant trauma. And it's like, you need to let that shit out, man. Like, seriously.
Speaking of letting things out, so I installed GTA 5, started installing it last night, and holy crap, a fresh installation requires like 106 gigabytes. And at first I thought, like, no way, fucking way, right?
Yeah. Yes way.
Holy crap.
Yes way.
It finished downloading and installing. I started it at around like 8 or 9 o'clock, and for whatever reason the Steam server was only giving me like 10 megabytes per second down.
They throttle.
Well, here's the funny part. So I was getting like 10 megabytes per second down, and my disk was just processing everything at the speed, 'cause I'm using a solid state drive, so it's all nice and fast. And then the next morning at like 8 o'clock, I check, and it's finally at like the last 5% of installation, and it finally finishes installing. And then I see that there's an update for Ace Combat. So I figure, okay, this thing's only a 500 megabyte update. Let's do it. And it gave it to me at like 80 megabytes per second at one point. It just instantaneously downloaded it, and then it only had to update like 1.5 gigabytes of actual game data.
I think the smaller the download, the more bandwidth they give you, because it's like they definitely throttle the bigger files.
So I was waiting for my real world simulator to install last night, and obviously went to sleep because I figured, fuck, this thing is so slow. Like 106 gigabytes.
Yeah. But they use every one of them too.
Oh, I know
every last one.
Yeah. Oh, I know. But it's okay, In preparing to let out some of this real world pandemic tension, I'm going to go commit some simulated criminal activity. I'm going to engage in simulated criminal activity and blow things up and jump out of planes and maybe boost some like imaginary cars and drive them into strange warehouses.
Yeah, it's very cathartic. I think one of the best things, like I've been playing since GTA 3, and when I started playing GTA 3, I went back and played the previous ones, realizing that they were like top down and not as fun. Even though there's like the same shit, it was definitely not as. Once you have the 3D, it was hard to go back.
Well, it's like playing any
GTA 3.
It's like playing any text-based role-playing game. Once you've played any MMORPG, like it's just not the same.
Mm-hmm. Did you ever play Fable?
I did play Fable.
Yeah,
that was the one where your
like,
face changed as you progressed through various stages of alignment, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it was one of the first games to do that, where your actions in the world influence how people in the world see you. And I think GTA has been really good about, especially once they started including how the gang factions worked and shit. Like the fact that you can get gang affiliation or have gang wars, and like people start shooting on sight and shit like that. The way that the reality of GTA's worlds has grown, it's just so real. Then you'll have like, in GTA 5, I forget which one I think they started in they might have started in Vice City. Well, it may even been 3, but there'll be like just random people in the city who have problems. It's basically like a side mission, but it's like you got to help them get their car back so they can go to work or something. It's like really just innocuous shit, but that real people would have to go through, and it's stuff like that gives the world, a depth that, man, GTA 5, I played through it twice, the full campaign, and I think it was like maybe 40 hours each time. I think whenever the first time it came out, and then last year again. But it's so easy to just put hours into that game, because it's like you can just get in a car and fucking drive around and look at shit.
Yeah, you don't have to do jobs.
You don't have to do anything. You can just drive around and look at shit, because the world is constantly like something is happening. Somebody is constantly, you'll see like a fucking police chase or something, or somebody will like rob somebody right in front of you, and then the people in front of them will like pull out guns and shoot them, and then the fucking ambulance will pull up and be like, what the fuck just happened? And they'll start talking amongst, it's like real. They did a really good job as to where you end up just like driving around to see what is gonna happen because so much random shit happens. Like the randomness generator that fucking Rockstar has been able to come up with is fucking tremendous. And then the radio station alone, oh my God. Like, I mean, not the one, but the fucking...
They actually play music.
Oh, tons of music.
It's crazy. Like, I've always been really impressed by that, too.
Holy shit. The hip-hop is amazing. The fucking old school rock and roll is amazing. The classical is amazing. And then
they have talk radio.
Like, they have different types where they have the fake right-wing radio. Then they'll have the, like, fake... new age shit, and oh my God, there's so much content that you just end up finding an excuse to drive around so you can listen to talk radio and shit like that. That's why you're like, man, GTA it's a whole different experience. It's just,
there are clubs with real world DJs in GTA. They created a in-game character for a DJ who goes by the performing name of Black Madonna. And she was doing a residency in, I think she had a Radio 1 residency and was doing some stuff in like a residency in Germany when Rockstar was like, hey, we're going to create like this club where you can see where the Black Madonna will perform and stuff like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But you can only see her in GTA. That's fucking amazing.
Well, I mean, you can see her perform in real life. I
mean, yeah, but in this context, yeah, in the sense of like
in the game, you can see the Black Madonna, peak Black Madonna, in game. For the rest of time.
Here's the thing though. Did you do the Travis Scott Fortnite experience?
No, I did not.
You can't do that in real life. The things that they did in the fucking I never played Fortnite, and the only reason I installed it was for that because I wanted to see what they did with it.
Yeah,
and it was like one of the most amazing like entertainment experiences that anybody's ever done.
Huh.
And he didn't do it live. It was obviously not live, and I don't think that is necessarily it didn't take away from it at all. You can watch it on YouTube, but having been there with tens of thousands of other people at the same time, because you could see their avatars. It was super crazy, and they did it multiple times. And they've done it with other people too. I think Post Malone did one. I don't fucking care about his music, but I don't care about Travis Scott necessarily either. But he's like interesting enough musically where I was like, okay, his music is interesting, so I bet this will be an interesting visual / gaming experience. And holy shit, it did not disappoint whatsoever, which is where I'm like, I think that in a combination, there's other things that are like potentially the future, because when you know that you're still sharing the experience with millions of other people or thousands, however many at the same time, then it doesn't make it feel as isolated, in contrast to the concert experience. Like you really felt like because you see these other people running around in the environment, you're not alone, even though it's virtual.
Yeah. Well, like in 1995, the anime Macross Plus was released, and there was a digital superstar called Sharon Apple. And so jump ahead, I guess 20 years. Yeah, 20 years. There was this the synthesizer company Korg. They also make guitar stuff. They're part of, I think, a Hoshino group. But they released this pedal called Miku, which was like the sound library that was used to generate the audio for a Japanese hologram pop star. So I think that there's an entire realm of digital media entertainment that's we've just barely scratched the surface in terms of what it's actually capable of doing. And that's like 25 years in the making, essentially, where we are now, of simulated concert experience. I think the biggest issue hasn't been the conceptualization of this kind of performance. It's more like the technology had to catch up to the concept itself.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's definitely part of it. And I think they are, like, the technology had to be there, but the vision also had to be there to make it applied in a way that is then interesting. Because I definitely, I don't think this could have been done with, the systems 10 years ago to make it look cool. It would have been okay, but waiting until now, or maybe they even tried a while back and it just wasn't good enough to catch on. So I bet that's probably it more than anything.
Well, they said that Foundation would never be filmed because it was too complicated of a story. Like,
who said that? When was that? 'Cause that's crazy.
This is part of the history of Foundation. They said it could never be filmed. It was too complicated. And so now, of course, Apple has done, God's work.
Yeah, it's fucking amazing, man.
I mean, visually, it has one of the best representations of the scale of space in science fiction that I've seen. Like, maybe Dune came close. Maybe. Not really. Foundation is just their visualization of the size of the galaxy that they occupy is just, we haven't seen anything quite like it. I mean, in Star Trek, they try to give us that kind of sense of scale with Voyager, both from the motion picture having gone out and come back, and then also the series Voyager when they end up in the Delta Quadrant somewhere. 70 years away, so at maximum warp. Like, even that just seems like, oh yeah, they're just gonna fly home, but we don't have this broad empire that's supposed to be under control and has lasted for thousands of years. And even the Empire and the Republic of Star Wars, that empire wasn't even around for thousands of years. It was really only around for like 30 or 40 years. Like, Foundation's empire's been around for a long time. I guess there might be contention within the empire within Dune, but
yeah, because wasn't it like 3,000 for Leto as the worm?
Yeah, but that's in that's in the section of books that most people don't get to.
Right, for sure. Yeah.
Like,
but this is where, the series has, like, the Foundation series has done a good job of even jumping between the 35 years that they're telling the story within, where it's like, I like that they're not trying to stay within 1 year, because then I think it may have even been longer than that. Like, I know there's like the 35-year story that Gail's telling, but I feel like they might flash back before. I'd have to watch it again, but between, like, it sounds like Gail and Harry's story, the way they're focusing on it is like a 35-year window, as far as I can tell.
Yeah. Well, she got put on ice. Yeah. And it was funny, like, when her pod gets pulled into the ship, I was just thinking to myself, like, how long is it going to take for them to reveal how long she was on ice? Because that tells us, like, where in the story she's going to emerge, like, with regard to the Foundation itself. And it's really cool, actually. I'm really enjoying the way that they're creating these characters. I think that it's really difficult to create a prison planet that's sole purpose is to protect knowledge, and then find a way to develop characters. There's really, from what we've seen, there's nothing going on except rocks. And they have a spaceport for, like, local trade.
you talking about on Terminus?
Yeah. How like it doesn't seem like they're part of an advanced empire.
Oh yeah,
Like
yeah, for sure.
Like, and so they're doing a lot with very little. Like, here's the warden. She goes around on her routine every day. Here are the scientists. We don't even know what they do, but they're sciencing. And there's not much going on because it's a desolate rock. It's a prison.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I think it's got to be really difficult to even imagine a character development within that framework. They're doing a good job.
I mean, at the same time, like, so the way that I'm understanding the construct is like them existing is because like it's not necessarily a prison in the traditional sense, but they were exiled there because they were followers of Selden, and because are existing in the furthest reaches of the Empire's like grasp, which is basically the very end, being able to live there is like their goal. So it's like not what they're doing, them being there is what they're doing, is as far as I understood it.
Yeah.
Like, so that's where I'm like, it doesn't necessarily need to get any more complex into showing how they exist on that rock, but them being there at 35 years shows they have conquered that environment. And by proxy, Harry's followers, even though we believe he has been killed, we're able to survive on Terminus without his guidance. And I think that was where, like, I think we even discussed it. It felt like Raish's murder of Harry felt like it came out of nowhere, but I think as constructed and plotted out as this series has been made to be, I feel like that confusion was meant to be on purpose. Like, I feel like they're trying to put us in the same mindset as Gale. And they do some things well and some things where I'm like, I feel like this is abusing the audience emotionally unnecessarily.
Well, if he's dead and they're just following his guidance and no longer following his heretical analysis, then they're performing their task in good faith. And if he's still alive, he's still a heretic, and it's still in opposition of the Empire. So I think that there's more logic to it than it first appears. I think that's why. Yeah, because it fortifies their mission, it fortifies their goal of succeeding.
And as you're saying, because he was willing to lie about the state of his equations for the sake of furthering his own agenda, taking him out of the equation was actually the best thing to do. And I feel like Raish isn't dead either. The way that they show us people appearing to die but not showing them actually dead, I think that's like not on accident. Like I feel like Raish is probably an android or some shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, I haven't read it. So that's why I'm like, it may be obvious if you've read the story, but and my thing is, even if it's in the story that way, they'd have the freedom to change things like that. And I hope they would change things that are like too on beat with the original. And that's where I feel like adaptations have that. They don't have an onus to change things, but it's a matter of like, if you're not changing anything, then it's not really an adaptation. It's just a clone. And I think
it's been over 25 years since I read Foundation. And so I can't remember a damn thing other than I like read through it and I really enjoyed it. By the third book, it started to feel like a lot of repeat. But I really enjoyed it. I thought it was really good. Every step of the way was like, oh, this is fantastic.
And there's things about Asimov. So have you learned about his son?
I don't know.
No, you know. His son is not, how should I say this? He did not do the Asimov name well. I'll just leave it at that. So
Oh,
this is where I'm looking at it like if you are trying
I think
to
Foundation's Edge was written by. Nope, it says Isaac Asimov.
like I have not to say that is discrediting his views of the future, but if you are not able to raise a son that does not become his son, I don't really trust your vision of the future. I don't really trust his capacity to look for, like, not to say that it's not cool, but his nihilistic and pessimistic views of human nature definitely.
David Asimov.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not even. Yeah. Anyway, he was not able to rear a child that did not become a horrible human being. So I don't trust that his views of the future are necessarily the best to lead us. Like, this is one of the things I'm starting to realize about, like, it's not to say that people like him and Frank Herbert should be discredited so much as their views of the future should not be held as in such high esteem as they were previously because of culture.
I mean, 23 years ago, David Asimov entered a plea were charged with 2 felony counts related to possession and distribution of child pornography. So
yeah, that's the offspring of Asimov. So he was not able to rear a child without him growing up and doing that. So I don't really trust his capacity to extrapolate for an entire civilization. I don't feel I'm the illogical or weird one there, but I don't think a lot of people. I think his son is hidden from the public's view, so we'll still revere him as a cult
I think
figure.
all of his robot series stuff is still pretty good.
Yeah, but even then, like his like the way his 3 rules got adopted across
across the board.
life. Yeah, it's like, well, maybe we shouldn't take his 3 rules because then that's how you end up with psychotic robots like his fucking son.
Man,
That's just science. I'm saying this is what this guy raised. Maybe we should rethink this. Because they don't tell us about David. Nobody ever tells us about. They tells us about all those books Isaac wrote. Maybe he shouldn't have been fucking neglecting his child while extrapolating on civilization, and his child wouldn't have turned into a fucking monster. Maybe. I don't know. I can't say for sure, but those 2 things are then going to make me re-examine how I then take his philosophy and his philosophical view of the potential for humanity. I don't think this particular guy's view on the potential of humanity should be as revered as it is.
I mean,
based on his inability to not raise David.
The body of his work is focused almost entirely on imperialism and automatons. We can anthropomorphize machines and grant them, what we consider to be sentience. But in all of these stories, the ones that do are typically punished.
Mm-hmm.
Because, in his stories, humans are the most dangerous thing in the galaxy.
Which isn't necessarily untrue at this point, but it seems mainly true because we have uncreative,
because we've
fake
got
enlightened people like
60s,
Asimov
we've got
telling
60,
us.
70 years of literary and film analysis to look back upon to look at this stuff and realize, holy shit, this guy was like, he wrote about imperialism.
Yeah. And did not give us any positive way out.
Yeah, no human actually succeeds in taking the machine down. At the end of the robot series, the brain is running everything through a remote machine.
Yep. None of these quote unquote fantastic, beautiful minds are able to give us a way out. It's just inevitable that it's all It's all bad. They can't see. And this is where I'm like, is it even possible for people in a capitalist society to envision an actual utopia because of the way utopias have been demonized and by proxy exploitation has become the nature of existence? It seems impossible for people to even fathom a utopia from this philosophical mindset. I've gotten close, but I don't know if I've succeeded.
I think that our society, modern human society, the utopia that it creates is the world that Kafka writes about. It's gray and kind of depressing, and everything is highly repetitive and mechanized.
But that's all you can like. I'm
also looking at Google News, and it's pretty depressing.
But I'm saying, like, is your only capacity to envision that utopia because you're raised in this society? You can't, like, the way that we are raised makes it. I'm posing that it makes it nearly impossible for us to actually philosophically come up with what a utopia would even be, because it has made it so that we are predisposed to want to monetize everything that is value.
I don't think that that's utopia. I just think that that's what our society has created for itself.
But what I'm saying is, I'm not asking you to envision it now, but what I'm saying is, in the way that we are conditioned, I don't even know if it's possible for anybody who's conditioned in this society to actually conjure up what a utopia would be without it being exploitative at some point.
Yeah, I was just trying to think. I don't know if
it's possible.
I was just thinking about, like, well, what would Star Trek minus the imperialism be like? And it's really hard. It starts to become
it's
a
really
Swiss
difficult.
cheese of.
It's really difficult.
It's like Swiss cheese science fiction at that point.
Yep.
It's got so many holes, and there are no episodes. It's basically people just going around and taking readings of energy.
I'm not even talking about a sci-fi. I'm talking about actually conceptualizing a utopia. I'm not talking about for the sake of science fiction.
No, I'm
just talking about.
That's what I mean. Like, it doesn't even hold itself together.
Yeah.
Like that. Even that version of a utopia minus the imperialism doesn't hold itself together.
Yeah, it's really difficult. And that's where I'm like, I'm not saying that the concept is even possible, but this is where I'm like, when you are raised in a certain conditioning environment, it becomes almost impossible to even fathom what that would be.
Let's see.
And it's like, if a utopia is only then defined as the opposite of the needs of having the needs and wants of a capitalist society fulfilled, then effectively a utopia is still a capitalist ideal. And that's what the problem is when you define utopias based on fulfilling capitalist needs and wants. Capitalism still defines utopia. It's really fucked up.
I'm going to say during the 16th century, during the Tianqi dynasty, or it's a period of the Ming dynasty. It's 1621 to 1627. Just because it has my name in it. I don't think that there's. We've ended up at the conclusion that capitalism doesn't solve its own problems many times, and I don't think that it's possible to extricate any of these concepts while we have capitalism.
Yeah, it's a really fucked up vicious cycle.
Yeah, even I mean, would it even be called utopia if we didn't have capitalism, or would it just be called Sunday?
Yeah.
Oh, it's October. It's Sunday. What do you mean?
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean? What do I call this? Indiana?
Would we need to put a label on it so that we could compartmentalize it and then sell courses about it?
I mean, we could just put a grid over the United States and say, instead of having names of racists or imperialists or colonizers for the names of streets or whatever, we could just call it, number and lettered streets, and then you could have grid sections. So this could be, the whatever county 16A, and the 16A3 would be the third city on the list of cities in county 16A. There's a way to do all that stuff. There could be some kind of alphanumeric combination so that people could describe where they are without having to reference a system that's built on blood and slavery and manipulation and just taking advantage of people. It would be hard. People would be really, people would be against it, of course, because they already know the names of all the streets. Why do they have to change? But so even if we had a system to transition to, 3 generations, the first generation is never going to see the fruit of their labor. The second generation is going to have to fight for it. The third generation is going to start to enjoy it, but there's still going to be people that are going to be holdouts for hundreds of years. Here we are 150, 60 years later, and people are still pissed off about losing the Civil War. So obviously people in our society can hold a grudge.
It's so true.
Multi-generation grudge. I'm so mad because my great-grandpappy's great-grandpappy got shot in a field. He didn't even own a slave. You know how expensive that shit is? And then you realize that, there's a society within our own, like a microculture that exists and has sustained itself on this belief that somehow they were wrong for owning. They were in the right and they were wronged when their slaves were taken away from them. I mean, it's even hard for me to say it aloud because it's so backwards. It's that's some like mirror universe shit. You'd think 160 years later there'd be people would have the clarity to be like, holy crap, like my family owns slaves, if that's the case, and then grow from that. My expectations are awfully optimistic. I'm pretty sure that these are the same people that are refusing to remain compliant with their licensing and certification requirements so they can keep their jobs. So I probably shouldn't even worry about that group of people. Except we have to, because a lot of those people have money and they keep douchebags like Mitch McConnell in office.
It's like, is he just gonna die in office too? For fuck's sake, man. When did
dude, they're gonna pull a fucking Dick Clark with on him, and like he's gonna be replaced by an automaton, and we're only gonna see him on like New Year's Eve, and he'll issue some grand statement that'll guide the Republican Party for another 6 weeks. That what's really interesting is that here we are, like almost done with year one of the post-Trump era, and nothing has changed. A lot of the anti-Trump sentiment has disappeared, but none of that energy is
like nothing is all
but none of that energy is sticking around to like be pissed off about the shit that's still happening at the border. And now I read things about how people are mad that Biden's like, continuing the previous administration's guidance on immigration, when the previous administration was just following the Obama administration's guidance on immigration, and they were just following the guidance of the Bush Jr. administration, who were following the guidance of the Clinton administration, who were following the guidance of Bush Sr. This is like, there's a pattern here. They're following the pattern or the guidance of the previous administration because that's just the easiest thing for them to do. but that energy is like not there. It was there when Trump was in office. Why aren't people still pissed off about it? People are obviously still pissed off about it, but it's just no longer a moneymaker for our media. They don't care about it as much. It's getting cold. Maybe the immigration season is wrapping up, but there's still people who are going to be stuck in cages.
That's what I was gonna say. It's like the people who were doing victory laps once Biden won, as if like racism solved and kids aren't gonna be locked up in cages on the border anymore.
Well, duh. I mean, wasn't that the promise? I mean, because
posting online about how their kids were glad that, you know, kids aren't going to be locked up in cages anymore, and they were crying. And man, those people are fucking annoying.
Whoa, they're simps for Biden. They're getting strung along. This is tough because I had a little bit of hope. It's like, yeah, maybe they'll like get back on track and start like start listening to people actually and start doing something meaningful. And here we are at the end of the first. And granted, there's a pandemic and supply chain issues and all this other horse shit that they probably wouldn't have had to deal with otherwise if there hadn't been a global pandemic. What really blows my mind is that everyone was like chomping at the bit for a vaccine, like leading up to 2021. And now we've got this weird condition where 40% of the population, a significant number of which are incapable of performing real research, are taking it upon themselves to listen to absolute idiots on the internet. Like, no common sense. Even the best advice is just, oh, they're just an expert. What do they know?
They just got a degree.
What could an expert possibly know?
They just paid for that degree. That's all.
Well, I mean, there is a problem with for-profit education system, but I don't think that the for-profit education system is turning out, our world's leading virologists and epidemiologists and microbiologists. I just don't think that there's enough. I don't think that the private sector was actually that interested in that kind of stuff when a university will do it. And then they can just,
Let's talk about that real quick, because what happens is all of the stuff that quote unquote big companies develop, they just end up holding a contest for some university students to solve it, whom they underpay.
Yep.
So all this stuff is always solved on a fucking campus somewhere by some student, grad student probably, who's getting underpaid by some company who got a government contract.
But hey, they got a really fancy analysis machine and a new computer for that year.
I mean, this is what Elon's been doing with Tesla and SpaceX.
Sorry.
No, I was thinking like Starbase.
Yeah.
But SpaceX basically just takes their government subsidies, which they get to fucking build shit, and then hold contests to solve problems. So fucking these students are the ones that end up always solving the problem, and then they come out and get the publicity, and Elon does his little fucking stupid dances.
Yeah, because they all of the work had to be submitted through some kind of licensing agreement, so that Tesla or Star whatever owns the actual outcome. Mm-hmm. Then they get to submit that for their research to the government. The government says, "Oh, good job! You did it under budget. You all get bonuses." I think like some big pharma companies do donate like entire labs like once a decade or something to an academic institution.
Yeah.
But that lab also gets heavily used for an extended period of time. I don't know. Can it really be about education if that much money's involved?
I mean, can whatever it is about be about what it's supposed to be about if money's involved? And that's why research that gets funded has to say it gets funded by whomever funds it.
Yeah.
Or if it's not getting funding, then it doesn't have. This is why money fucks everything up, man. It's like if somebody gives me money to research something, suddenly my research is then vested in their interest. And that's where it's really, really crazy to have people having to compete for grants and the way that research is just like becoming commodified, a commodified market, so that the people who are paying for the researchers have the best pick as far as they can pay the least to get the most. But in the process, it ends up making the field biased towards what pays. So that's how it becomes biased research, because it's like you're going to cater your proposal to what you think is going to get funding, and rinse repeat.
And that's how we get like a generation of video games that are clones of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And a generation of movies that are clones of each other.
TV shows, music. Yep. Exactly how that shit works.
There are times when I like to...
Focus groups.
Being a part of a focus group is kind of fun, though.
Yeah, I mean...
It's really kind of fun. I encourage everyone to try and get on a panel at least once in their life, because you'll get to try something and have an opinion about it, and that company will pay you for your opinion.
But they don't allow you to actually have an opinion. They only allow you to have the opinions from within their selected choices that they give you.
Well, yeah, because they're producing data sets.
Right, and if you have free response, more than likely they're not actually going to look at it, and that's where it's like when it's like there's not a huge difference between a focus group and a push poll.
Yeah.
And that's why it's like focus groups are fun and they're great to participate in, but at the same time, the way that they are used are not actually doing what they're claiming to be meant, like what they're meant to be doing. In the process, they're actually reinforcing some specific executive's agenda almost 9 out of 10 times.
Chick-fil-A CEO takes a bite of sandwich. This thing's it's a little too dry. Get a focus group together. I need to make sure that at least 65% out of 100 people, or 65% of the sample, will agree with me.
Yep. Yep. That's exactly how that shit works, man. Because then people rarely look at the sample sizes or sample populations for the stuff that gets quoted, which is how they got away with doing that shit anyway. So anytime you see Americans in percentages, usually it's 1,000 people or less. Almost never more than 1,000 people get polled for anything that gets reported in the media. Almost never.
Yeah, the last time I did a focus group, the group itself was limited to 20, and there were 3 groups a day, and they were running the survey over the course of 1 week. So whatever that turns into, 60 people a day, 5, so 300 people. And that decided that was part of the research for Domino's Pizza. It's not a lot of people. They probably did it more than once. Probably was multiple weeks. I was only offered 1 week to participate though, so.
Yeah, I used to do well. I was focus group. I signed up to focus group test video games, but then in the process, I did it a few times and then realized it was only them asking like, "What would you buy as DLC if we had a full game? How could we strip things out and make it DLC?" And I was like, "This is fucked. I thought I'd be playing a video game, and they're just asking me like." What you would buy here, like, would you buy this? Would you buy this as add-ons? And this is where the way other people were responding was then frustrating because people were like, yeah, I'd buy that. I'd buy that. Like, you fucking idiot. Why are you telling them you'd buy that? Like, the whole point is right now you have the opportunity to say, no, I wouldn't buy that. Like, I paid fucking $50, $60 for this game. I'm not paying $5 for a fucking car skin. No. But then there's these idiots. Well, if it allowed me to customize it, yeah, I guess I'd buy that. And you're just sitting there at the table, these fucking mouth breathers like, oh, this is why the fucking Avengers game has all this like fucking built-in problem. Because the focus groups are people like you who are telling these people on the front end, you'll buy it, and then you go in and complain when they try to charge it.
Man,
it's the same fucking people.
I'm like, I'd probably be a terrible person for a video game focus group because I'm the gamer who wants to grind for everything, and I'm not willing to give anyone any money. They'd be like, this guy's just grinding the shit out of it. What the hell? Well, we better give them some kind of reward. That's why I think that all of these games that are grind heavy are really just some kind of mask for cryptocurrency mining. I mean, it's literally games that literally have mining as an activity where you have to stay in a certain location and let your processor churn for periods of time. The longer you do it, the more of a reward you get. And half the stuff you have to translate into some other like transitory currency so you can use it in other ways, if you can even do that. And a lot of games, they'll ban your account entirely. Like there are a few games that I've played over the years that, I mean, I haven't spent like money on them, haven't put real world currency into them, but there's enough time involved that I'd be really sad if I was no longer allowed to just even access the account and just look at it.
There's like a time where I feel like once I put a certain amount of time into a game, I don't know what it is, it's arbitrary, but once I feel I've crossed that threshold, I do not feel bad, and in fact, I feel better buying DLC or buying something to help the developers keep making games. But that's also where once it becomes like, oh, this is my decision, not because they forced me to, and not because it's part of the main storyline. I'll give a good example. Fucking Control. I don't know if you've played that or seen it.
We've talked about Control before.
The game is fucking amazing. And one of the best parts about it is the way that they build the story. It all takes place inside of a building, but the building is basically an infinite number of rooms in it. Like the way that, because it's a supernatural building, it can go on forever, because it's basically like there's a panopticon within it, but it's effectively a living labyrinth that's self-aware, which is this is like one of the coolest storylines ever. So this is kind of where there's like all the ways they build in like enchanted weapons, like the way Mjolnir in history is described, they update it. So like now your enchanted weapon is effectively like a shotgun, but it's still enchanted by the same types of forces that Thor wielded when he had Mjolnir. And that's kind of the narrative that they build, connecting old god lore with modern science and then the supernatural stuff that's happening. It's like unprecedented. And then on top of that, they're able to make being inside the entire time in one building still work. So that worked out. But then they have like DLC. So I went ahead and bought the DLC even though I haven't even fucking played it yet. Just because I'm like, okay, I like what these developers did. I want them to keep making this shit. So I'm just gonna like make sure that I support them because this is the only way in this system. I can talk about it all I want, but until I buy the DLC, there's no indicator to their executives that they have succeeded in making me support them as an organization or as developers. So that's kind of where once I've been like, okay, this is art. Like the people who made Quantum Break, once they made me believers in their capacity to make art, that's when I'm like, if you guys make something, I'm going to support it until you stop making art. And then once you stop making art, I'm going to stop supporting. It's like CD Projekt Red, fucking Witcher series, fucking awesome. Cyberpunk, not so much. So I'm not going to buy that shit until they fix it. I'm not going to, like, I'm seriously, if it takes them 10 years, I'm not going to buy that shit until they fucking fix it. You know what I'm saying?
That's right. I want Cyberpunk 2087.
They finally fix it. The final patch.
And then next year it'll be the 2088. How many? That'll actually be an interesting like outcome if Cyberpunk gives us like every year they add another number to the year instead of Cyberpunk 2077 2. Unless it's supposed to take place like in the Simpsons universe where it's the same week every year.
Yeah, I don't know anything about the plot.
Yeah, I don't know anything about it either, other than that it's a buggy ass game that caused all sorts of headaches and locked up people's GPUs and had people's GPUs running at full steam and barely running. It just makes me wonder, like, what actually is going on in game development when they... I mean, I know there are a lot of really, really talented game developers out there who make a lot out of the most basic systems, but and then I also understand that there are entire genres of music that demand having subwoofers and comprehensive full spectrum reproduction because they make use of the entire audible spectrum for some reason. And so I get it. There's some things that require like a lot of juice to get it to work right. But when it doesn't work on like really high end systems, what kind of bullshit is that? I mean, you'd think that a game would just flop completely if it didn't even run on a high end system.
Mm-hmm. But then that's probably those like people who want to support CD Projekt Red while giving them the benefit of the doubt because they are like huge Witcher fans or something, which then becomes exploitative. And that's where I'm like, once people start exploiting that fucking fan like support, that's when I disconnect, because that's where I'm like, oh, you're going to start shipping unfinished shit because you know a bunch of people are going to buy it. And then that is your new business model. So I'm not fucking with CD Projekt Red until they prove that they're not doing that shit anymore.
Well, they're just taking a page out of the automotive industry.
Right. Basically.
The automotive industry is always announcing new vehicles and selling pre-orders, and then like a bunch of companies recently all had to shutter a bunch of production lines, like new vehicles that are going to be new for 2022 that are supposed to be in production now, like aren't going to be delivered on time because global silicon shortage. But making big promises that cost loads and loads of money, like Ford just announced, or they're releasing a new truck and they've got 100,000 plus pre-sales, and meanwhile they've already got like 100,000 plus pre-sales of some other new SUV that they released last year or this year or whatever, and they had to stop production of all of it because they don't have chips. And then yeah. So there are a few companies that are kind of insulated because Toyota's fucking smart as hell. And the last time there was I think a tsunami or something happened they had to shut down one of their production lines because they lost a bunch of chips. And they're like, we can't let this happen again. Or maybe there's a flood in Taiwan. Who knows? There was a problem. So they just bolstered all of their supply chain. So they've got enough chips to make it through the projected chip shortage and supply chain downturn. But they were just being really forward thinking about it. But not all car companies have done that.
No, definitely not.
I mean, every week I read about another production line being shuttered for some indeterminate amount of time. And then there are like fields of brand new cars that are waiting for their CPUs to be installed. They're just sitting there in a park in a dirty field, getting rained on and getting beaten by sunlight.
I hope this stops the yearly car cycle. I find if this is what stops it, I'll take it, because people getting yearly car updates to the same model instead of having modular vehicles was the dumbest shit ever. And I mean, as someone who owns an automobile, like, I don't think automobile culture was a good shift, in that there was previously infrastructure culture in which people were able to move around because there was enough infrastructure built around transportation. Destroying that infrastructure and replacing it with automobiles is what exacerbated the climate problem. But even further, the way that it became just another form of like exploiting short-term desires and turning around and then like having a yearly model of the same fucking thing. It like, there's no, people don't even like cars, because this is when I'm like looking at it. If you're riding around in a PT Cruiser, oh, you don't actually even like cars. You're just fucking getting this because you saw it on a fucking commercial or some shit. That's an ugly ass car. It's not fast. It's not good for transporting people or things. So if you drive a PT Cruiser, you don't actually even care about fucking cars. So there's like too many shit vehicles, too many non-aesthetically pleasing, non-fast, non-agile vehicles out there that can't do anything except be this middle of the ground fucking, oh, this is a Taurus. I'm driving a Ford fucking Taurus. There's no Ford Taurus should fucking exist. Not even the super high output one. Fuck that one too. There's one
car company that absolutely sells everything on fun to drive. Fucking Zoom. That was the best marketing. And then what did Mazda do? They bought a fucking racetrack and invited all their competitors to bring their cars to whatever they would have. They have a vehicle for that class, and they'll race around the track and see what's up. And occasionally somebody else wins. Occasionally they win. Occasionally it's, just an exhibition for people to drive around real fast. But I think there are still car companies that want driving to be fun.
Oh, for sure. Most definitely. I mean, they exist, but
they're not the big volume leaders.
That's not the big volume leaders, and that's not even a common thing. That's not even common. Like, the notion of having fun while you're driving, you would think that would be common. We have to think hard to find a car dealer or a car brand maker that wants to make driving fun across all their vehicles. There are very few of those, which means, that's what I'm saying, like, very few of automobile maker brands have anything to do with like an actual fun experience. And it's all just about like, oh, now you want to appear to be in this class or whatever the signaling is. It's not even about having fun driving.
Yeah.
And that's where you don't have to, you can go fast in a straight line. You can drive around fucking slow Sunday driving. You can fucking drive fast around turns where you have to, be more prejudiced about applying the gas. Those are different types of driving experience. I'm not saying you have to drive like fucking Formula One all the time, but people don't even have fun driving at all. let alone like any of the actual types of applying modern physics or modern like builds of the engines. It's like these people are just getting these cars to sit in fucking traffic.
Man, what you just described makes me want to. We need to go down to there's a off-road park down in Linton, Indiana, or Duggar, Indiana, and it's an old coal mine and just a bunch of trails through the woods, and it's like riding around in a really slow roller coaster. It's exhilarating. Not going fast, just driving real slow up these really steep inclines, and then driving down really steep inclines and driving over like rocky shit that you wouldn't want to take a normal car over. It's like it's one of the weirdest liberating experiences because there are no roads. You just go where you can, kind of thing. I realize that's not an accessible experience for a lot of people, but
well, that's how I know I'm black, because that does not appeal to me at all in terms of like anything you just described. Like, I get how that could appeal to someone, but like all of what you just described, I'm like, none of that appeals to me. On a four-wheeler, man, I'd probably end up killing myself going on a four-wheeler, going fast, or like on a dirt bike. But like slow, steep inclines, I don't even like to do that on my feet, let alone on a fucking car. Nah, fuck that. Nah, hell nah. Like, I'll jump out of a plane before I'll walk up a steep incline with no rails.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Man, I remember
like those fire towers. I hate like I would quicker jump out of a plane before I'd walk up a fire tower with no rails. It's like straight up a 50-foot fire tower. The feeling I get like internally, like I will literally it's like the feeling that you're about to get before you jump out of a plane is like, let's go. But like I look at a fire tower stairs like, nope. That's structurally unsound. Nope. It might follow, or one slip. Nope. But give me a parachute, 14,000 feet. Let's go. As long as I got a backup. Yeah. So it's like, it's weird how, like I said, what you just described to me is like all kinds of nope. But I can see how somebody else would like get a huge exhilaration from it, because it like takes away, it gives you some control, but it gives you just enough of not having control where you're like, something could happen. If this fucking tire slips, I'm done. This car's about to flip. And that's why it's exhilarating.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's some of those courses or trails, the vehicle is pitched to the side like 40 degrees, 6 more degrees, and the thing falls over.
Now, see, if the car is doing that because we're like hitting high G's, now I'm in it for, I'm like, okay, because we can kind of maybe correct it, but I'm even then I'm like, nah, I'm cool on the drifting. I'm cool on the like 2-wheel stuff.
Yeah,
it's like,
I don't like 2 wheels.
The older I get,
I just like driving over these things real slow. All 4 wheels are definitely on the ground, but real slow, like excruciatingly slow. And if things start to go a little weird, just stop. It's like the opposite of fast driving. The tension almost always comes from stopping, getting out, surveying the land, trying to figure out the best line. Whereas driving on a country road or driving on the interstate, it's more like maintaining your course and having the best line so that you can avoid anything else that's sharing the road with you.
Yep. And those are 2 different things, which is also where I'm like, I know what I enjoy is like the G-force that you feel in your stomach when you're going through a curve at high speed, or when you're about to take off in a plane, or when you're like falling. Yeah. That's what I enjoy. I don't actually enjoy the loss of control. That's not what, like, that part is not, if I could take out that part of everything, I would. And that's where I'm like, I know exactly what part of speed and velocity I like, because it's not even just about pure speed. I like turning. Like if you just went in a perfectly straight line, I get bored.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well,
but some people wouldn't. Where
that's
I
like
need
sitting
turns and I need flips and shit, and other people don't necessarily need that stuff.
See, that's why I think like cars like Miatas are perfect, because they're so small that you can throw them around just a street corner, and you'll feel like every ounce of it. But then it just doesn't weigh anything, and it's like it's on rails always, and just goes where you point it. And they're not overpowered. They don't make too much noise. They're not so big that they would really destroy things if they collided with it.
Well, and then I'm thinking, like, in my ideal experience, what would that be like in a physics engine? It would be effectively if you could move as fast as the Flash with as much mobility with the Iron Man suit. That would be my ideal like physics movement. But you can't do that in a car without fucking dying. You can't do that in a plane without dying.
Inertia.
And that's where virtual worlds come in, because then you get like what's it called, megaton rainfall, where it allows you to experience that shit as close as possible, and then you're like, oh god, I'd puke after like 30 seconds if this was real, like so there's things about the virtual world that then keep me grounded in the real world. So when it's like, yeah, I'll keep my G-force experience limited. I'm not gonna do barrel rolls in a plane. I'll do barrel rolls in a fucking roller coaster. We'll keep it on a track, just so physics don't. There's the possibility of the belt coming up, but that's where it's like the control is very limited of what is being taken out of my hands at that point, because it's like I can look at the safety ratings and the number of accidents, and there's so many things I can look at to say it's very likely that this 30-second fucking roller coaster ride is going to go exactly the same as it did the millions of times before. Whereas, on a like off-road thing, you can't do that.
I wonder what the actual failure rate of the safety restraints on roller coaster train cars is, because I just read about
low, right?
I just read about a girl who fell out of one of those dropping tower rides, and in the analysis they concluded that she must not have fastened the lap belt. Like, she just pulled it over her lap, and the attendants didn't check it. Well, they didn't check it, apparently, or maybe they did, but they didn't check it sufficiently. And so, is that a failure of the restraint system?
No, that's human failure.
Yeah, that's a human error. That's operator error. That's ride participant error.
Yeah.
They didn't instruct the riders on the importance of making sure that the thing worked. They just kind of assumed that everything was hunky dory. And that's I'm not trying to diminish the loss of life. That's unfortunate as hell.
That's not what it sounds like at all.
But I'm really curious, like, how frequently does the restraint system fail? I mean, how much of that is the restraint system not being used properly, or someone like puffing out their stomach so it won't be too tight, but really all it does is prevent it from locking completely?
I mean, I think more than the actual thing failing, because again, in the same way with car doors, like they'll open and shut a car door maybe 10,000 times before it hits the road because it's being tested. So there's like all these things so to ensure that the mechanical fucking moving parts don't break after overuse is where I'd think, but at the same time, people have been faking standards and getting past standards, so it's hard to know.
That's that monetary incentive rearing its ugly face again. Fucking monetary incentives.
Yep. If it's for profit, then it's not for safety.
Exceptional radio. Exceptional radio.
Exceptional Randos Show is produced live in Sunroom Studios' Base Capsule and in partnership with KLST 103.5, RadioCallisti.org. Remember to catch our Exceptional Randos live stream on YouTube every Sunday between 2 and 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And if you have a story, idea, or question that you would like to share, we want to hear from you. Thanks for listening.